Seems like you got some confessing to do too, detective. Some shit you've been keeping real close. Lying to me straight to my fucking face. Yeah, Marvin called me. Told me that task force had a snitch on him this whole time.
Over the course of Season 3, we've gone through quite a few investigations involving Famous, Marvin, and Detective Howard. We've also looked at Rock, who had eyes on her at the beginning of Season 3, who has been able to evade law enforcement, at least for the time being, because who knows what the future holds. Now, going into Episode 10, it seems like the spotlight is firmly on just two characters, Marvin and Detective Howard. So as we've done with previous investigation breakdowns, we're going to be looking at the latest events from 309 in a bit more detail. We're going to be bringing the entire investigation together in terms of the case for both Marvin and Detective Howard. We're also going to look at the implications of both of them going to prison and how it would impact everybody around them. And finally, we're going to be rounding off with some general thoughts and theories on who I believe is the most logical person to put in that orange jumpsuit come the end of Raising Kanan Season 3, Episode 10. Now, just as a very quick brief overview, we know that Agent Tanner specifically targeted Gerald Moore because he knew that he was in the same anger management class as Marvin in Season 2. So this was actually a setup by law enforcement way back in 302, with Gerald giving them information ever since.
Tony Deep. Sounds like a porn star.
What you sound like to me is somebody I don't even fucking know.
Throughout Season 3, all Marvin's done is being a good friend to Gerald. He's been there in a time of need for him and his daughters. On the other hand, we have Gerald, who was asking questions he shouldn't have been asking. He was also poking his nose into business, which didn't necessarily have to do with entertainment, culture, or arts. He was only supposed to be writing a piece about Duke to help build her image and put her on the map. But asking Marvin about Dean's connection to organized crime and the connection that Bulletproof Records had to the Italian mafia, it really should have rang alarm bells for Marvin. Gerald was specifically targeted and blackmailed by Agent Tanner in very similar fashion to that of Proctor in Power. So thanks to Gerald, the FBI have been building a case against Marvin piece by piece. With Detective Howard, he's been cleaning up a lot of mess. Detective Beck wasn't letting up on her investigation. She was someone who almost inch-perfectly pieced a puzzle to Howard being shot by Kanan at Baisley Park, Rock being Howard's CI back in the day, to Kanan also being their son. When he realized she wasn't going away quietly in 301, he took pretty drastic action to protect himself, Kanan, and Rock. We then saw the FBI setting shop at the precinct, which made life very difficult and complex for Detective Howard. Not only were they investigating the New York crime families, but Howard was completely left in the dark because he was nowhere near the investigation in terms of who their main targets were or suspects. So this forced Howard to making a move to take Ogden's role, trying to send law enforcement down the wrong direction, to also warning others to back off. Now, for majority of Season 3, Howard has actually done a pretty good job in covering his tracks, to potentially even having a backup if everything else failed.
What about that task force bullshit? What they getting into?
They ain't got nothing on nobody. No suspects at all.
Now, just keep this conversation in mind because it is something we are going to come back round to in just a moment when we talk about sacrifices. But with Howard, it was only until Captain Beck began to feel some remorse and regret around what happened with his daughter did Howard begin to come under the spotlight. Majority of the pieces were already there from his daughter's investigation, as well as his conversation with Mr. Bingham, but he was still missing those crucial one or two just to finish the entire picture, which is where we're going to come over to the latest events in 309. Agent Tanner and the FBI aren't going away without a win. Howard made that clear in the conversation with Rock. They're going to have to give them someone. Now, Rock refused to sacrifice Marvin. She said there was no way she was going to give up her big brother, which I think also rules out the theory of her setting up Marvin for when he did his bid in Elmira. This was also backed up by Patina Miller, who responded to a comment on one of London Brown's posts on Insta, where someone actually questioned that move. So we can actually put that theory to bed. But can we confirm Detective Howard won't go and do it anyway, especially because Beck does seem to have put him in the firing line. While he was busy trying to clean up his mess involving Lou, Shannon's father came over to the precinct to speak to Captain Baptiste. This is where they started to find missing pieces to the puzzle we spoke about earlier, with one of them being Laverne Thomas.
Captain Burke didn't do anything in the colony, and she ain't giving us drugs.
She knows Detective Beck had nothing to do with Nicole or anything to do with selling drugs on Southside. She also saw Detective Howard going to Mr. Bingham's, but when she was questioned, she stood firm. She said she had no idea of any kind of connection between her father and Detective Howard. In other words, it was a big fuck you to Agent Tanner because he may just have ruined Duke's music career. But with Howard, he was caught in a right situation over at the precinct, which I think he handled pretty well, or at least as well as he could. Now here's where it starts to get a little complex for Howard's story. He knows that he's firmly in the firing line, which again, is backed up by what we've seen in the trailer for episode 10, along with the synopsis. So this is where I do want to come back around to that conversation I asked you guys to keep in mind. Howard didn't tell Rock about Marvin being investigated for a reason, and I feel like he was keeping this card up his sleeve just in case he ever found himself in trouble, which he now does. So could we see him going behind Rock's back and potentially give up Marvin to the feds? Because someone has to go down, there's no two ways about it. Agent Tanner and the FBI aren't going away without a win this season. They made that pretty clear throughout the entirety of season 3. So could Howard potentially give up Marvin to save his own skin? And that brings me nicely over to the case for Marvin Thomas. Now Marvin's transformation has been nothing short of extraordinary over these last few seasons. From making mistakes, being reckless, to missing opportunities, he's turned his relationship around with Duke. He's also shown his caring and loving side, but at the same time, when called upon, he's proven he can get shit done both in a violent manner and a non-violent. But it's because of his transformation and big heart, he finds himself in the position he does, and he really did take this one hard, because nobody's tried as much as Marvin to right his wrongs. Now this resulted in Gerald dying through an overdose, but even with Gerald's betrayal in episode 10, we are going to see him going to the cemetery, which is most likely visiting Gerald and his daughter. Now with Gerald's death, Agent Tanner has now lost his CI, and with him questioning Jukebox trying to learn more about this connection, you do get the feeling he doesn't have too much evidence to bring Marvin in, just yet. But is this where Detective Howard comes in? This is where we get to the topic of sacrifices. Will Howard give them enough on Marvin to throw him under the bus? Or could Marvin eventually take one for the team? I know that Rock said she was never going to give him up to the feds, but what if that is literally the only way out? What if Marvin going down is the only way they can come out at the other end? Now just before we break that down in a bit more detail, let's take a look at the implications of both Marvin and Howard ending up in prison. For Marvin, he's a gangster. If Rock told him that this is the only way, and if he were to go down, we don't have to worry about him talking to save his own skin, or cutting any kind of deal. There's no way Marvin would do that. But if he were to go down, what happens to Jukebox? Would she then blame Rock for her father going to prison? And could that not only change their relationship, but also leaving her with nothing in Queens, where she then makes a decision to join the military? If Marvin were to go down, then we'd also have to ask the question, what happens to Rock and a new operation? Marvin has been somewhat the rock and the glue for the family in recent times. He's been there for Duke as a father, he's been his brother's keeper, and with Rock, he's been her go-to to get shit done and get shit done right. So if Marvin was to go down, the implications that it would have on Rock would be huge. Not only would she lose her right-hand man and her muscle, but it would also leave her on her own to run this operation. She'd be losing Marvin to the feds, lose probably in rehab or in South Carolina, Duke would go to the military, and we all know about her relationship with Kanan, which isn't exactly in the best of places. So it really would leave Rock with a bit of a mess and an uphill battle in season 4, one which she could no doubt overcome. Never underestimate Rock, but also all the more reason to maybe make a deal and a new alliance with Snaps and Pop. So that's just a thought. Now I raise a point about Marvin going down quietly for his family because he's loyal, but would Detective Howard? He said he wasn't a snitch, but when you are looking at life in prison, your tone might begin to change. He's also very crafty who knows both the law and the streets. So if Howard were to go down, I think we need to be mindful of whether he would go down quietly, and also the impact this would have on Rock and Kanan, because let's not forget, Howard is Rock's inside man. Having someone within law enforcement close to this investigation is highly beneficial, so Rock really would be losing someone of value. But that's the history, the case for Marvin and Howard, as well as the implications for both. So now it's time for my general thoughts and theories. Now, we can make a good case for both of these characters to go down, but we also have to be mindful of there could be a twist. For example, was Gerald the only snitch that Agent Tanner had? Could he be bought new information, maybe from a Dina foil or a new source? I think we have to be very careful when we look at the synopsis, as well as the trailer for episode 10, which does make it look like Howard is the one under real pressure, because I think they want us to think that Agent Tanner is closing in on Howard, when in fact, in the very last moment they could spin this back around to Marvin. So we just have to be mindful that these trailers are there to kind of deceive us. Now with that being said, after putting this breakdown together and after rewatching a few episodes from this season, it really does make sense Marvin does take the rap, because it serves a lot of purposes for other plots and storylines to move forward. One of the biggest is Jukebox. The writers have given us enough happy moments from a music to a relationship with a father, and I think it's about that time where they rip it all away. There's a reason why they've been building this relationship up this season. They've been building up everything around Duke, just so they can rip it away. Duke would then be left on her own. Maybe she blames Rock for Marvin going to prison, and then it makes sense for her to join the military. I also wouldn't be surprised to see a small time jump next season, where Duke is moving a little different. But Marvin going down just makes sense for Duke's character growth, development, and also who she later goes on to become. Marvin going down also fits in his nature because look, let's be real, Detective Howard is right with what he said. He would understand if he had to take one for the team. If Rock asked him that he needs to take the rap and there's no other way, I think he would do it to save his family. Again, it would leave Rock on her own, and it could also be the turning point in her and Duke's relationship, and potentially why she needs to create new alliances with Snaps and Pop. Now, having said all of that, could there also be another twist to the tale? Could Duke come to the rescue and give the cops something on Detective Howard to save her father? Duke isn't no snitch. There's no way she would talk to the feds and give them what they want on Marvin. But if it did mean saving her father over Detective Howard, I think Duke would, by twisting the truth. And this is kind of based on her going to Detective Burke in season 1 and throwing her down the wrong direction. So there definitely is a lot of ways this can go, including maybe even both of them going down. We do also have to consider both Marvin and Howard going down. But one thing's for sure, Agent Tanner and the FBI aren't going away without a win. They've made that pretty clear. So it's either one of these two or even both. So drop all your comments and predictions down below on this storyline with law enforcement and who you think takes the rap. But as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.